Good afternoon, students. This is Miss Nurul from the English Language and Literature Department. Today, for assembly, we are going to share with you the EL debate showcase that just ended recently. This debate was part of the Secondary 3 students' weighted assessment in Term 2. Here are some of the objectives for the EL debate. Firstly, we would like students to develop critical thinking skills. Next, we would like students to apply the skills of argumentation and persuasive speeches in oral delivery. Next, we would like to hone confidence in students when they are presenting to an audience. And lastly, we would like students to hone the skills of engaging an audience and responding to questions and feedback. The secondary 3 students were divided into groups of 2 to 3 students with 7 debate motions. The proposition and opposition teams each have about 3 speakers. Before the start of the research process, the team leaders were asked to draw lots to determine debate motion as well as the side of the debate motion. Proposition takes on the side that agrees with the motion, while the opposition takes on the side that disagrees with the motion. This is an overview of the class debate in a typical EL classroom. After the proposition and opposition team members have presented their arguments, they will then come forward and respond to the opposing team's arguments. This can be done on Google Chat or through a live rebuttal in class itself. Based on the feedback that I've gotten from the Sec 3 EL teachers, many have mentioned that they allowed for live rebuttal in class. This, of course, created a livelier classroom atmosphere. After the rebuttal is over, it is then open to the floor to respond to the team's arguments. Before the lesson ends, the teacher will give a debrief on the debate motion. There are 7 debate motions in total, so let us go through them. Motion 1, recycling is a waste of time. Motion 2, the government should ban people from smoking in their own apartments. Motion 3, heroes must be faultless. Motion 4, social media affects our relationships with other people negatively. Motion 5, we should ban pet shops. Motion 6, people who take part in extreme sports are irresponsible. And lastly, we have motion 7, giving money to street beggars does more harm than good. And we have come to the most exciting part of the showcase today. At the end of the debate presentations by everyone in the Sec 3 cohort, the Sec 3 EL teachers have chosen the best debater for each of their classes. Without further ado, we present to you the best debaters for the Sec 3 EL debate this year. Enjoy!
Good morning, Miss Tang and my fellow classmates. I am Nigel, Proposition Speaker 1. To begin with, the motion I am debating about is that recycling is a waste of time. To my group, this means that the numerous drawbacks of recycling renders it meaningless, and thus, time spent on it is squandered away. We agree on this definition as the disadvantages outweigh the benefits of recycling, causing it to be not worthy of our time. Recycling is becoming increasingly paramount in present times, mainly because we are attempting to reduce the harm we've inflicted on the environment through global warming and pollution. To promote recycling, multiple colored bins have been placed outside multiple areas which are easily accessible, promoting the recycling of unwanted items, among other measures. Such measures have been commonly thought to greatly reduce waste generated by humans and thus lessen the harm we have inflicted on Mother Nature. However, is recycling really worth the time and effort we have dedicated to environmental conservation? My team, as the proposition, is exceptionally supportive of the view that recycling is just misspending time. First of all, this is because recycling is a more troublesome version of directly disposing unwanted items into rubbish bins. Many items that are recycled often require additional resources to be treated. To illustrate this, when recycling empty plastic bottles, they have to be washed thoroughly before being sent for recycling. If all of us contribute to recycling plastic bottles alone, just imagine the enormous amount of water that we will waste on washing them, since not every one of them can be recycled. Furthermore, only certain materials are recyclable. According to a study mentioned by CNA, 70% of respondents do not fully know what can be recycled. This means that many people may have placed countless non-recyclable items into recycling bins, such as clothes and bags. When such items are disposed of into recycling bins, they require supplementary effort to be conscientiously sorted out from loads of recyclables by workers, but yet eventually still end up in landfills just like general waste. This may be because they are rejected for recycling due to their extremely poor conditions, either having been torn apart or broken into many pieces. According to BBC News, in just 2014 and 2015, 338,000 tons of waste were rejected for recycling in England, and 97% of rejected waste ended up in landfills and incineration plants in 2013 to 2014. It takes just seconds for someone to place an item that they perceive to be recyclable into the recycling bin, but may take hours for workers to resort and pick out non-recyclables among millions of tons of recyclable materials, repeating the same time-consuming task every day. Eventually, these non-recyclables end up in the same location as general waste we throw into garbage bins. We can thus see that recycling is just taking a longer time, extra effort and even resources to dispose of these refuse, deeming recycling as a waste of not just effort but also time. This brings me to the end of my speech. Next, Preposition Speaker 2 will be elaborating on how recycling wastes more resources than it saves. Thank you.
As the second proposition speaker, I would like to state that residents smoking in their apartments results in other problems besides health issues. Smoking at home will sour relationships between the smokers and their neighbors and also lead to tension between one another. First and foremost, secondhand smoke emits a really unpleasant smell, and as mentioned by the first speaker, constant exposure to it is harmful to us. As a result, residents living around will have to close their windows to prevent the smoke from wafting in. This will restrict air circulation and the apartment would be very stuffy. The neighbors who live near smokers will be more inclined to lodge complaints against them and would not be happy living in their apartment. For example, during the circuit breaker that occurred last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, families were cooped up at home, which also led to an increase in friction between neighbors. According to the National Environment Agency, NEA, it had been getting more complaints about smokers since the circuit breaker kicked in on April 7. In the first 4 months of the year 2020, NEA received 11,400 cases of feedbacks related to smoking, about 2,000 more cases than during the same period the year before. As the data has shown, the problem of residents smoking at home is a key source of unhappiness within the community. Can you imagine secondhand smoke drifting into your house daily? Could one possibly tolerate this nuisance? Due to the fact that smoking in one's own apartment is not banned, neighbors who are unable to tolerate with the secondhand smoke will either have to give in and bear with it or bring up this issue with the smoker. This will definitely give rise to conflicts between the residents, as confronting the smokers will be accusative and they might get upset as well. Having to give in to their neighbors and deprive themselves of their chance to smoke is definitely not an option to them. According to a news article in Today, a news site in Singapore, Mr. Louis Ng, who is a member of parliament, highlighted an incident on how a woman applied to resolve her dispute with her neighbors over smoking through the Community Mediation Centre, also known as the CMC. Her neighbors refused to attend the mediation session and insisted on their right to smoke at home. As shown in this article, if these people were to smoke at home, they are inconsiderate since they would be cognizant of the repercussions of them smoking at home. Thus, they would be unwilling to change their ways and not stop smoking at home. With both parties being unhappy, it is an undeniable fact that smoking in one's own apartment brings about disharmonious relationships within the community. It is quite ironic, as we have always been encouraged to maintain good relationships with everyone, and yet smoking in one's own apartment is still legal. Banning smoking in one's own apartment is an ideal option, as it helps to reduce chances of friction occurring between neighbors, which helps Singapore to attain its goal of a harmonious coexistence between neighbors. And this also helps impact a smoker's health positively, as they would not have as many opportunities to smoke as and when they want to. To sum this up, The government should ban smoking in one's own apartment, as it reduces friction between the neighbors and also alleviates the unhappiness of residents affected by smokers.
Good afternoon, Ms. Nurul and my fellow peers. This side of the House welcomes you to this debate. The motion for debate today is recycling is a waste of time. Now, we, as today's opposition, strongly believe that this is not true. The motion, as it stands, is a lazy generalization about the inefficacy of recycling and serves to perpetuate the fallacy of false dichotomy. We believe that the motion is a sweeping one, which erroneously suggests that recycling as a whole is a futile exercise. This is not true. We need to take a deeper dive to examine the costs and benefits, both monetary and non-monetary, of recycling across the entire spectrum of materials, which will help us arrive at a more balanced and reasonable view that recycling is still an efficient endeavor that should be undertaken. We, as today's opposition, have structured our case as follows. I, as the first speaker, will examine the state and efficacy of recycling of different materials to support our view that recycling is not a waste of time, at least where certain materials are concerned. I will then discuss the economics behind recycling to dispel the myth that recycling is inherently more costly. Our second speaker will then elaborate more on how recycling actually helps the environment. Without further ado, I will come to my first argument that given the current state of technology, recycling makes sense even if it's not suitable for all materials yet. No reasonable and sane person could in good faith say that recycling is desirable, period. Alan Hershkowitz, an American environmental scientist, made a reasonable point that it is obvious that not all materials found in a municipal waste stream can be recycled, nor can all consumer products be made from recycled materials. A New York Times Magazine piece mentioned some hard facts. To cancel out all the greenhouse effects of a New York to London flight, you would have to recycle 40,000 plastic bottles, and that's just if you fly coach. You need 100,000 bottles to make up for a business class seat. This doesn't even account for the amount of water you're wasting to clean out your recyclables either. You could actually be increasing your carbon footprint if you're using heated water to wash out leftover residue. In the same New York Times magazine, the author mentioned that 90% of recycling greenhouse benefits come from the following: aluminium, paper, and cardboard. Reusing these items rather than focusing on materials such as plastic, glass, and rubber comes with substantial advantages. Recycling cardboard and paper doesn't quickly drain monetary resources either. Plus, manufacturing cardboard and paper from raw sources is incredibly expensive, so there's no question that reusing this product is cost-effective all around. Creating plastic and glass from raw materials doesn't put much strain on the environment, so they may not be worth recycling at all. What does all this mean? It means that recycling is not a waste of time if we practice targeted recycling. My second argument is that cost of recycling compared to the cost of manufacturing new materials must take into consideration factors other than monetary cost. Usually, comparing the market cost of recyclable material with the cost of new raw materials ignores economic externalities. What is economic externalities? Economic externalities is the external cost or benefit that is not reflected in the final cost or benefits of a goods or services. In my argument, I am of the view that we need to factor in the negative externalities that comes with producing new raw materials. The majority of externalities are negative. Some negative externalities, such as different kind of environmental pollution, are especially harmful due to their significant adverse effect. Creating a new plastic, for instance, may cause more pollution and be less sustainable than recycling a similar piece of plastic, and these factors are not included in the market cost. Despite plastic appearing relatively easy on the environment when manufactured from raw materials, there might be hidden costs that cannot be identified just by looking at the final cost of the product. This therefore affects the true cost of the product and thus undermines the harm of creating a new piece of plastic. A life cycle assessment can be used to determine the levels of externalities and decide whether recycling may be worthwhile, despite unfavorable market costs. Alternatively, legal means such as market tax can be used to bring externalities into the market so that market costs of the material become close to the true cost. Therefore, it is not true that recycling is inherently more costly and less efficient. To argue that recycling is a waste of time is because it it is more costly monetarily is a flawed view.
Good day, Miss Ng and fellow classmates. I'm the third speaker of the Preposition team for the motion banning pet shops. My main point today is that the banning of pet shops can help bring about a new wave, a good one, to the pet industry. Since the basis of the ban is the inhumane breeding methods that are not supervised sufficiently by the government and the exploitative prices that pets are sold at, this will eventually change alongside the ban, with many breeders helping breed for animal shelters or other humane pet societies. Like these, shelters will be able to ensure pets are available to the public and that the pets are bred in a moral and ethical way. Prices will also not be affected severely, as the breeding of pets is not expensive in general. With the prices being extremely reasonable and it being an ethical process, many will be able to support the industry and it would still be able to thrive. Thus, more income will be generated in the long run and increase the number of pets that will be bred. Next, let's start off with a breakdown to help illustrate another point, which is that pet shops have better alternatives. In decisions, there are usually many different options, but only one will seem to be the most ideal after careful consideration, and this holds true for this motion. Pet shops or more humane societies, such as animal shelters, which one to get your pets? To me and my team, there's a very obvious answer to this, and that is that humane societies, especially animal shelters. To start off, further elaborating of the first proposition speaker's points, there is a high standard of care in the animal shelters as compared to pet shops. According to the Singapore Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, SPCA, there are strict rules and policies which ensure that in animal shelters, every animal is placed in cages that are sufficiently spaced, which makes way for a healthy living condition. There is also proper sanitation procedures carried out in all shelters. Not only that, do you know that all animals are checked regularly by veterinarians? And also, before you adopt any pet from any animal shelter, the veterinarian will also check your pet for free. With this, you can be assured that the pet you adopt will be extremely healthy. Secondly, expanding on the second proposition speaker's points, animal shelters let you adopt pets for extremely reasonable prices, with figures from around $100 to the maximum of about $400, as many online sources quote. When you look deeper into this and you realize that the medical care, sanitary care, and the operation of the shelter is actually the main cost of this money that you're paying. And in essence, you're not paying for the pet, you're instead paying for pets to be bred, saved, and adopted in a moral and civil way that is supervised strictly by the government. Does this not sound enticing to you? If it doesn't, I do not know what is. Also, pet shops do sell pet accessories, but shopping online is a viable option, and SPCA also does sell pet accessories. So in that aspect, pet shops are not needed. To conclude, my team has reinforced that pets in pet shops are ill-treated, used for exploitative and unfair prices, that there are better alternatives such as animal shelters, and that a ban can help bring about positive influence to the pet industry. So stop promoting business for pet shops. Thank you.
Good morning, stars, me and my fellow classmates. I'm speaker number 3 from Group 8, which is opposing the motion that social media affects our relationship with other people negatively. After hearing my previous 2 teammates' presentation, I would like to bring you guys the aspect of benefits of social media, which is definitely going to be the main point of my debate. Social media helps people to share their difficulties and worries they are in life with other people. Sounds kind of gloomy theme compared to my teammates, right? But nonetheless, trust me that it will uphold for my point. So, how does social media help people to share their worries and difficulties with other people online? Firstly, we have to understand that humans are social beings. We need companionship to advance and thrive in life. When we are facing issues, things we don't want starts to kick in. Stress, anxiety, and even depression will overflow us with negativity. And in order for us not to feel so out of breath, we need to let it out to somebody who understands us. And that is where social media comes in to save the day. Personally saying, I'm currently not facing with any mental health issues, but I do have friends who are. And from what they've shared with me, it is very difficult for them to say it to anyone out there in the public, because it's understandable, because not everyone out there has basic knowledge or a good amount of knowledge about mental illness. And many of them tend to remark people with mental illness being too sensitive, overthinking about things, or even finding hysterical. This is definitely not what they need. What they need is support, not disencouragement. Social media allows them to go to specific ones and groups out there with people facing similar issues. This allows them to spill their inner thoughts out comfortably to receive comfort at the same time. Minority groups as well have their own online groups to share their daily struggles, to find familiarity and self-assurance in their life. So why do people tend to turn towards social media when they are facing difficulties in life? This is because social media provides them a safe platform that overcomes barriers of stigma and disesteem for people to share their experience, whether they are facing mental illness or when they're facing difficulties in life in general. And by sharing your feelings to hundreds and thousands of people out there who are feeling the same as you, you feel a sort of connection and you can feel some sort of comfort. So in conclusion of our group, we find that social media actually affects people, like as in our relationship with others, positively. We can actually show support to others people which we have similar interests through social media. We can share useful information, train medical personnel, and even compare and therefore improve the industry through social media. And of course, lastly to my point, we can use social media to help people to share their woes and difficulties in life with other people. So the final takeaway of our group is social media isn't necessarily bad, or as I say, beneficial or negative. It's the thing that matters is the determining factor is how do you use social media. Thank you, and that's the end of my debate.
Good morning, teachers and my fellow classmates. The motion of today's debate is that the government should ban people from smoking in their own apartment, to which we disagree. We would like to start by defining our definition of own apartment. In the Oxford Dictionary, own is defined as something that belongs to a person or thing that is in the mansion, which in this case is a set of rooms of living belonging to them. We would like to lay emphasis on the fact that this space or land is someone's personal private space, and that what people do in their own home and houses is not the government or any person's problem. Today, as the first speaker, I will be talking to you about personal space and why smoking should be legal in one's private space. Our second speaker will be highlighting how smoking in private apartments will help improve the well-being of others compared to smoking in public places. Our third speaker will be talking about the smoking culture in Singapore and why it cannot be banned completely. In today's argument, I will discuss the limits of private space and why smoking in one's private apartment is not the government's concern. Privacy. It is the fundamental human right that is so important to us. Whether it be data, financial, body, identity, or even location privacy. All these various aspects of privacy are all equally important. In this case, we are specifically talking about the privacy of territory, the right to our personal space, away from government force. Privacy is important as it gives us the power to choose emotions and thoughts that we want to share with the world and what we don't. Privacy also helps to protect our physical safety and the safety of us individuals against larger corporations, which in this case is the government. All in all, privacy protects our freedom and that we cannot be truly free without privacy. Freedom of speech allows people to express themselves without the fear of being closed up by authorities. We do understand that freedom of expression is not an absolute right when it affects the well-being of others. However, smoking is a relaxing and coping way for many, which Speaker 3 will further touch on, and that it does not intrude and affect the daily lives of others when smokers smoke considerably, which Speaker 2 will touch on and go in more depth. My main argument for today is that when what we do in the comforts of our own home is only for us to know, and maybe the few others that we choose to allow access to, and that when we smoke in the comforts of our home, it is our right to keep this away from the government. Home is a private space, and there is nothing the government can do if the resident refuses to let them in, especially because in Singapore's context, smoking is legal. Therefore, it goes without saying that smoking should be none of the government's issue, as the smoker is not breaking the law or affecting others. To peep into people's private lives and ban them from smoking in their own space is a line that cannot be crossed. Smoking is not a public hazard and that public officials are supposed to care for, let alone when they are doing this in their comforts of their own home. In conclusion, I strongly hold the opinion that smoking in our own apartments is the right to our privacy of territory, and that the government should not have the authority to peep into our lives within it and prohibit smoking in our apartment. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Suraya and fellow classmates. I am Shannon, the third preposition speaker of the motion. Social media affects our relationships with other people negatively. The spread of fake news can negatively affect our relationships with other people. Based on research, people cannot tell the difference between real and fake news. This causes confusions and misunderstandings between social and political issues. Because of that, many would be misled, and this leads to arguments and conflicts when we do not know what to believe. Studies have also shown that false information can continue to influence beliefs and attitudes even after being debunked. Due to the fact that many of us blindly believe what we see on social media, we are very vulnerable to the spread of fake news. The spread of fake news can cause distrust between people as we would not know what to believe anymore. Although we know of and are exposed to so much fake news out there, we still seem to be doing nothing about it. Then aren't we the ones ruining our relationships with other people? This affects relationships between people as we would all have our reservations towards each other, and this leads to unrest in the society because arguments would arise when people cannot trust each other. This way, we might distance ourselves from each other because of the spread of fake news. This clearly shows how much harm fake news on social media causes because our relationship with others is drastically affected as social media has a big impact on our lives and we can't do without it. Furthermore, research shows that 45% of students said that they rarely check for suspicious news materials that they see on social media, and 60% of students admitted to sharing fake news online. This is very worrying as it shows that we are actually oblivious to what we share on social media, and because of this, we might grow to become skeptical of each other, and this leads to distrust in the society. Would we want to be the cause of the spread of fake news? In conclusion, I strongly believe that fake news leads to negative relationships between people. I hope that everyone can put in effort to stop the spread of fake news so that there will be stability in the country and everyone can have good relationships with one another. All in all, I agree that social media affects our relationships with people negatively as it causes people to feel insecure, it leads to addiction and the spread of fake news. Thank you.
Heroes must be faultless because heroes uphold a high standard in the eye of society. And if they were to deviate or fall short of this high standard, there might be serious consequences involved. Heroes are those we look up to. They have talents, skills, abilities, and achievements that surpasses normal human beings like us. However, when they make mistakes, they let people down. People become dejected because the hero they have always looked up to is no longer heroic in their eyes. They will no longer regard them as their heroes and no longer believe in them. They may blame themselves for being so naive and ignorant. Some people may also be so devastated that they may end up taking their own lives for the failure of their idol. People close to the hero may also experience huge psychological stress and public stigma that they may no longer be able to lead their normal lives. Sometimes the impact might be far more widespread and damaging. Supporters of the hero may be so discouraged that they no longer believe in themselves, nor their peers, nor has faith in the system or process that they once adored. This can be a setback for the society as a whole because people will no longer strive to pursue their passion in the affected domain. Dwindling survivors may struggle with absence of standards or benchmarks as there is no longer an ideal figure for these despondent people to model after. One example to explain my point is someone who was deemed as a hero in the public eye, Lance Edward Armstrong, an American former professional road racing cyclist known for winning the Tour de France 7 consecutive times from 1999 to 2005. Armstrong founded Livestrong Foundation, a non-profit organization which helped raise over $500 million for cancer research, treatment, and support, including $6.5 million he personally donated. However, in January 2013, Armstrong admitted that he had used performance-enhancing drugs to achieve all of his victories. This confession came after more than a decade of denying that he had used banned substances like EPO and steroids. The US Anti-Doping Agency wiped out 14 years of Armstrong's career, including his record 7 Tour de France titles, and barred him for life from the sport. Bitter, anger, and disappointment filled the hearts of his 80 million over fans. Many felt betrayed and lost hope for the sport. Just imagine the feeling of discovering that the sport you love had such cheating. A decade's worth of victories could no longer motivate you. Hence, my team believe that heroes must be faultless to avoid further repercussions. Thank you.
Good morning, teachers, classmates, and the proposition team. I am Danelle, the third speaker for the opposition team. They believe that heroes should be faultless, but we disagree. Our third point is that fault, rather than perfection, allow heroes to act as ideal role models. We look up to heroes. We learn from the teachings they give while doing their job. We learn from them to have perseverance and to not give up the moment an obstacle meets our way. Many don't realize this, but we perhaps learn the most from the mistakes that these heroes make. There is an anonymous quote that goes, "You can do 99 things for someone, and all they remember is the one thing you didn't do." People are more likely to remember the faults than the merits. Thus, when heroes display their faults, these moments serve as memorable lessons for the people. They are impactful, and they stick with people's minds. We learn from heroes examples of what not to do. We also learn that it's alright to make mistakes, that it is perfectly fine to mess up sometimes. We relate to our heroes better and are able to find more inspiration from them because it's realized that heroes are human too. Usually, people are hesitant to hold someone who seems perfect or flawless as a role model because it seems a standard impossible to achieve. We realize that even our heroes make mistakes, and may thus be more willing and more inclined to learn from them. Take for instance DC's Flash and Arrow duo. When Barry Allen first becomes the Flash, he finds himself lost, having been just an ordinary person before he woke up from his coma. He then seeks advice from the Arrow, Oliver Queen. Despite initially doubting his own abilities, he ends up drawing inspiration from the Arrow's experiences. It makes the Flash believe that if the Arrow could save lives and protect the people in his city despite his faults, then he could do the same for his own. He even learns from the mistakes or certain wrongdoings that the Arrow had made, and is set on avoiding those mistakes at all costs. Eventually, he gains confidence in himself and becomes the savior of the city on multiple occasions. This teaches us that mistakes are actually essential in not only personal growth, like our first speaker has mentioned, but in inspiring the growth of others as well. Had the Arrow not made many infamous mistakes, or not known to be a notorious figure as a vigilante, but instead had everything done to perfection, the Flash would not have been inclined to listen to what the Arrow had to say. Had he not been able to relate to the Arrow, that cinematic universe would have won this hero. I would now like to pose this question. Would you rather learn from someone who is perfect, or someone who shares the same flaws as you? Having similar flaws with an impactful figure allows us to learn from them better. Mistakes allow people to relate with and learn from the heroes. This is exactly why, however counterintuitive it may seem, that faults make heroes better role models. We thus urge you to take our stand in believing that heroes should not be faultless. Thank you.
Ms. Tang and my fellow classmates of 301. I'm Lee Tai from Group 13, and today my team and I will be debating Motion 7. Donating money to street beggars does more harm than good. Now, before I continue on with my debate, I would like to establish the definition of this motion for everyone. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, the word money means coins or notes that people use to buy things. As for the word street beggars, the word is pretty obvious itself. It basically means poor people who live by asking others for money or food. As for the words harm and good, these two words have a very sharp contrast to each other, negative to positive. But the word harm basically means physical or other injury, form or damage, and the word good means very satisfactory, pleasant, enjoyable or interesting. Now, since that we have established the definition for everybody, I would like to introduce my team's stand towards this motion. My team stands on the preposition side, saying that we agree that donating money to street beggars does more harm than good. I, Lee Tai, as Speaker 1, will explain to you all how this donation can actually further exploit some children, especially when they are the ones begging. And Speaker 2, Siobhan, she will be going through with you all how donation to these beggars can promote this reliance for them that they can live off just by begging, and they will thus become lazier. And as for Speaker 3, Irene, she will be closely examining with you all how this donation can affect the country's economy itself. Okay, so now that I have settled everything, I would like to start with my debate. So first off, imagine you are in this foreign Asian country, okay, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia. You go to a food center, you go to a night market, and you're walking on the street, and you see this old lady sitting on a piece of cardboard, cradling a child in her arms. The child is barely 6 to 7 months old, but is furiously coughing and wrapped in a dirty robe. It's very obvious that the two of them are in a very dire state and they are in desperate need of help. Unconsciously, you reach out for your purse to take money. After all, who would not? With the means, why wouldn't we help them? But let me stop you right there. Did you know that many of these women and child beggars that you see on the streets are actually victims of human trafficking? According to Evita Shaniva, she has said that these beggars are often forced into doing this begging for mafia groups. And with this money, it's usually used to buy drugs. These beggars are also usually sent to the more wealthy cities, as it's easier to target the rich people. Since rich people have more money, it will thus be easier to gain more sympathy from them, as they have more means to do so. And when you are caught in this cycle, when you do your donation, you are caught in the cycle of crime. You are giving these mafia people their own profit, and you might even be paving a new way for a generation of beggars because they see this as a source of income. This will not only affect the country itself, but the tourists and the tourism that might come into the country after. So therefore, I leave you with this thought of how your donation in foreign countries towards specifically these children and women can easily affect anyone. And now on, I'll pass the debate to Speaker 2, Siobhan.
That marks the end of the EL Debate Showcase. Congratulations to all of the best debaters of the cohort. We would also like to acknowledge the efforts put in by the Secondary 3 students for this debate. From the bottom of our hearts, we hope that you have enjoyed this journey with us. For the Secondary 2 students, we can't wait to hear from you next year. Thank you for your kind attention. Goodbye.